So, Kartikay, this law passed, but there are details still being worked out. What is happening now?
So, in 2018, the CCPA passed unanimously. They set aside 2019 to figure out some of the details of how it would be enforced. And one of the big proposals that we saw this week, Friday, was this right to private action. It would, if passed, permit consumers in California who feel that their data has been distributed without consent or in breach of their user agreements to sue for monetary damages against companies like Facebook and Google. There are a number of other proposals, like the right for consumers to find out how much their data is worth, and B, to gain access to that data and to know exactly how it's being distributed down the line. So there's a lot of proposals up in the air.
Ariel, does common sense support some of these stronger potential additions to the law?
Yes, common sense is very supportive of efforts to strengthen the California Consumer Privacy Act. We expect also to see efforts by industry to weaken it, which we will oppose, but we're very supportive of strengthening efforts, particularly this private right of action that Kartikay mentioned.
So, Kartikay, what are the tech companies lobbying for? Because they opposed the law initially. They funded the law as opposition, right, but ultimately everyone was on board with what was written. You know, what are they lobbying for now?
Well, against a right to private action, for starters. In a committee hearing last week, a lobbyist for the industry said that this would be a bonanza against the industry. There will be so much litigation that it will be tough to come out from underneath from. So that's a big no-no for the industry. There's some details as well, like the right to have loyalty programs with consumers that they want to ensure, to protect. That there are some concerns that they would end up being sort of discriminatory, and then some details in the weeds about exactly who is being covered, which businesses of what size, those sorts of details.
Ariel, if the law passes as written, what would change for me as a user?
If the California Consumer Privacy Act, are you
right,
the private right of action? So if
right,
this new Senate Bill 561 by Senator Jackson passes, you as a California resident would be able to take a company to court if they sell your data when you've told them not to, or if they're not transparent about what they do with your data, or if they don't let you delete it or access your own data.
So, couldn't this law, Kartikay, be overruled by federal privacy legislation if it comes?
That's a concern, right? If Congress ultimately down the line passes some sort of legislation that would preempt what's happening in California, there could be a scenario where everything that the lobbyists are fighting for in Sacramento could be null and void.
Ariel, as I understand it, the tech companies are already lobbying in Washington on, potential federal privacy legislation. What do you know about sort of the back and forth between these companies and lawmakers, and what ultimately could end up on the table?
So the companies want federal legislation, but they want federal legislation that will preempt all state legislation. And there are some folks in Congress who are supportive of that. There are other folks in Congress who would like federal legislation, but they want it to be a baseline to protect all Americans, but allow states to continue to innovate. So that's a real fault line. And if we see a private right of action expanded in California, I have no doubt that companies will be clamoring even more for a federal right, and one that prevents states from offering stronger provisions.
Now, California Governor Gavin Newsom is talking about a data dividend, advocating that companies actually pay consumers for use of their data. Is that something that makes sense to you?
I'm not sure that Governor Newsom has provided sufficient detail that he has full specifics on a plan right now. He's talked about ensuring that consumers know how much value that they're providing to companies with their information, and we think transparency and knowing what you're giving up, because you're not really getting these services for free, would be a good step for consumers to have some awareness of the value they're providing.